positions to deal with Marine tank. You want to focus on getting your Banelings on the Marines and then your Mutas to hit the tanks. Unfortunately right here my opponent wisely pulls his Marines away, and you know, that's all you have to do as a Terran player. Just yank your Marines back and let your tanks do damage to the Banelings, and that's exactly what my opponent did. So now my army supply is really lower than my opponent's, and right now I'm still at a pretty big disadvantage. Unless I can get some saturation going at the gold, and unless I can hold off this attack, then this is probably going to be a pretty quick GG. So I am waiting to get my Marines and my Lings and my Banelings out, and I'm going to obviously wait for when I feel it's safe to engage. And that may require me to sacrifice my gold expansion. Sometimes you just gotta lose it in order to win it. But we'll see how this works out here. Here comes the Lings and the Banelings. Obviously the creep providing such a bonus for my units. I was able to get that speed upgrade. My Banelings rolled right in there, and they were able to take out those Marines. So that's really one of the key reasons why you want to spread creep. You want to make sure your creep spread is as good as possible. And if you're Terran, one solid piece of advice I can give is don't try to move your units over creep. Drop scans, get rid of the tumors, and then slowly inch your way forward. Don't ever fight on creep. But it looks like my opponent still has quite a decent army at the center. I wasn't really able to kill everything, and so this is when you can use the other tactic, which I did last game, which is bring your units around and pick off reinforcing units. So this is exactly what I'm going to do. Bring my Lings around, pick off the tanks that are coming, and this does two things. It prevents the army size from getting unmanageable, and it also may force him to pull back his army. And look at that, he is going to pull back his Marines. So seeing those Marines getting pulled back, I can now, of course, bring my Mutalisks in to harass the tanks. And so, really, it's kind of a little bit of back and forth action, especially when you're in this kind of a desperate survival mode, as I am right now. But I'm obviously going to try my very best to hold off my opponent's attacks. If I can hold off and if I can kill off my opponent's entire army, then I can re-establish my gold expansion, and I may have a chance at winning this game. Now, I'm just waiting and biding my time, waiting for the right time to attack. Obviously, if you have Mutalisks in this position, it's always nice to fly in and pick off whatever tanks you can, and try to improve your situation, because obviously this is not a good situation if you're Zerg. When your opponent has a mass tank Marine army and he's killed off your gold, he's threatening to continue his slow push forward. Now, as you guys can see, I see my opponent has unsieged his tanks. This is the right time to attack. When those tanks are unsieged, my Banelings can freely roll in and pick off those Marines. And now that all the Marines have died, my Mutalisk can easily go to work on the remaining tanks. And that right there is the window of opportunity you have to wait for if you're Zerg. It's all about being patient and never attacking too early, but of course not attacking too late either. And the factors that went into my decision making to attack there was A, my opponent was on the creep. B, he was out wide in the open, so I had a perfect flank to attack from all directions. Do note right now I'm also picking off the leftover tanks as they fall back. Every single tank here makes a huge improvement towards my game moving into the late game. And the other factor that went into it, the most important critical factor of all, was my opponent unsieging all of his tanks. If you're Terran, that is a huge mistake. Don't ever unsiege all your tanks at once. You should always unsiege half and leave half siege and then move forward slowly but surely. So because my counterattack was so successful, I now have complete map control. I'm able to re-establish my gold expansion, and my opponent has fallen back everything back to his natural expansion. So I do have a very strong advantage right now. And this is really the window that I've been waiting for all game. The odds, the playing level has finally been leveled out. And as soon as I get some saturation going over the gold, I will be in a great position. So as you guys can see, because I've got all my mutas, I can obviously fly in, pick off some of these buildings, pick off some of these SCVs as they're transferring over. And luckily for my opponent, he gets his throw out just in the nick of time to deal with my Mutalisks. So very good timing right there from my opponent. But obviously this game still very close. It's difficult to tell who's ahead. A Terran player on 2 base is still a threat, and especially if they can get the gold expansion and make it a planetary fortress, that becomes an almost unstoppable force on this map. So it's still anyone's game to take away at this point. Now, as you guys can see, I am going back home, going to work on my macro and getting all my upgrades. I have +1 for my mutas, +1 for Carapace, +1 for melee, and I'm starting to spend all that money and gas on as many Mutalisks and as many Lings, throwing down extra hatcheries wherever possible, and trying to keep my money low. If you guys watch my game, usually I don't let my minerals or my gas exceed 1,000 a piece. If I ever do, it's usually because I'm busy in some kind of a massive attack, busy microing, busy doing something, but I never just sit idly by and let those minerals and gas rack up. Unless, of course, I'm supply blocked, which, you know, that happens from time to time. So, as you guys can see, my opponent is finally starting to move out. So far, a very, very close game. I was able to come back from an almost unstoppable situation when the Terran has his entire force in your face. But now it's very, very close. My opponent now has mixed in some Thors into his army, which does make it a little bit more difficult to deal with, because now your Mutalisk control has to be right on point. You have to be able to do the magic box trick. You just can't fly around picking off tanks left and right. And so here I'm going to actually try to pick off a tank, and I get brutalized for it, completely punished. And so exactly what I was saying, you can't go in and pick off tanks like you could before, because the Mutalisk will clump up and then the Thor will just demolish them. So it looks like my opponent is planning to pick up his Gold Expo quite soon, and as Zerg, you really don't want to let this happen. And it looks like my opponent is also posturing his units over to the left side. He's going to try to shell my gold expansion down, and he's slowly inching his tanks forward. So eventually I'm going to have to figure out a way to deal with that. And I think the best thing to do right now is to split your forces, get half of it down towards the bottom and the other half towards the top. And this is all about splitting your Zerg army and trying to get a good flank and good surround off from all directions. So that's exactly what I'm doing right now. I'm splitting my forces, getting ready to posture to move my units over. And it looks like my opponent has a couple of his Thors here, so I was going to try to magic box him. But unfortunately, my Mutalisk decided to keep flying forward into the Marines. I was able to pick off the Thors at the end of the day, but then a huge misblunder right there from my forces, and really just me clicking completely off point. And that's exactly what I wanted to talk about, is your Mutalisk micro, your entire micro as Zerg at this point has to be on point, because if you fail like I just failed, and you bring your Mutalisks over and you forget to push S for stop, and the Mutalisks continue flying forward, they are just going to get demolished by the Marines. And honestly, right there, that attack was a huge blunder by me. And you guys can even see I tried to pull my army towards the north as well to try to do the flank attack, but it didn't work out. And it just goes to show that one small misstep, one small mismanagement of your units at the late game can really cost you quite heavily. And so my opponent, his huge blunder was unsieging all of his tanks at once. My huge blunder was not telling my Mutalisk to stop over the Thors. So I'm going to try to rectify this issue by picking off this planetary fortress. Obviously, I'm not going to sack the Banelings on the fortress, but I will use the Banelings to pick off the SCVs. So my opponent's still on 2 base, but he's still pushing forward with quite a large army, and I'm going to go in for once again another attack. Notice I have my Banelings selected. I'm going to try to follow the Marines, but unfortunately my opponent so good with his Marine micro, and if you guys rewind this video, you guys will note that he was not on the creep. He pulled his Marines off the creep, and that's when the Banelings have a difficult time catching up. So I realized at this point, probably gonna be GG. I guess it might have been a little premature because I did have the backside expansion, but nonetheless, my opponent, a very, very solid Terran player. And at that last second, pulling his Marines off the creep, very wise. And my opponent is actually in the Masters League, Mr. Tenoja. So yeah, the new star, unfortunately not going to be able to reach it today. Maybe I'll be able to reach it tomorrow. And I just want to thank you guys for tuning in. This is HD Daily Ladder number 14, and this is HD signing out.